2010, we informed them of our plans to try to be operational by July 1 of 2011 on our Main Street property. We reviewed ideas of the facility, including utilizing redevelopment opportunities for off-site improvements, as well as impacts of traffic and so forth. We also suggested that we had been approached to purchase the Harris Street property near the landfill, which is fully permitted for a 20-acre transfer facility by Palo Verde disposal personnel. We could basically pull permits and start construction. The decision and our guidance from your staff and subcommittee was we wanted to keep this facility in the city of El Centro, and please build it here. We followed that guidance. We submitted our development plans, our zoning classification amendment, our conditional use permit application to the city at the end of last year, with the assumption that the environmental clearance would be a negative declaration, a 45-day process. And the CUP process, or CUP application, would be completed by the first part of 2011. As you know, the city reviewing committee decided to require a focused environmental impact report, EIR, and with time constraints of consultants, we anticipate possibly having permits from the city at this time next year, hopefully sooner. We are in the process and have paid the city the fees to have this work done by the independent consultant. We have proceeded in applying for a medium volume transfer permit with the LEA, but it has been delayed. This permitting is up to 99 tons a day at our Main Street property, and staff and planning department has been cooperative. With collecting over 200 tons a day here, this 99 tons does not go very far. To make a long story short, yes, our intention was and is to pass on savings in landfill costs to the ratepayers in El Centro. With the lower landfill gate rate, and even with costs of a transfer station movement of trash, we felt we could pass on savings to the ratepayers. This has been stalled, and we have no choice but to pay the local landfill rate increase to $54.48 a ton. If we can get a reduced rate by this time next year, we are more than happy to pass that savings on to the ratepayers. And if it should come prior to next July, we will either do it immediately or pass that on July 1st. We have told your staff that, and we will do that. So, with that said, Mr. Solomon, if I could go back to your question.
Yeah, the 12 years. Is
Yes.
that more to recoup money that you have put in for the different things that you're planning to do here in the city?
Yes, we're looking at about $1.5 million investment in our Main Street property. That's assuming that we can do some redevelopment opportunities out in the street, because, you know, there's not sewer there. We've talked about capital improvements on the sewer. We've tied into your water. Electrical needs are all maintained now. We've got to put some fire hydrants and so forth and so forth. With that, and with the transfer and setting up some long-term contracts, we felt that a 12-year extension onto the contract was applicable. As you know, the current contract allows for a 2-year extension at the end of the term. So I think it has 3 or 4 years left. And then we suggested, well, we were going along with a 5-year. If you continue to either pass the rates of street sweeping on to the ratepayer or continue to pay us. But in the savings of almost $4 million over 16 years, I think our feeling was that 12 years was justified, yes. Now, should it be 13 years? Should it be 11 years? I mean, that could be negotiated, but we felt we negotiated in good faith with your staff and came up with 12 years.
Thank you. I do have a request for comments, so let me take that. Mr. Breckman? I can't quite make out the name.
Opportunity in 2015. Okay, that's what we're hoping for. If if we look at a 12-year extension, we're closing the door as a city, as a franchise, as a marketplace, closing the door on soliciting competitive pricing in the future. You know, the other thing I'd actually like to mention here is I actually brought the third amendment that that CR&R is proposing. Okay, do I pass that over?
If you get the clerk, please.
What this is, what you're looking at here is page number 2 of the third amendment to the solid waste services contract the city currently has with CR&R. And the one that's highlighted here is the second sentence that I really want to elaborate on, because I feel like, quite frankly, there's some details that are going unnoticed and not discussed. And that concerns me. We do own a business here in El Centro, the Valley Environmental MRF, Material Recovery Facility on 702 East Heil Avenue. So not only does it concern me as a potential bidder in the future, it concerns me as a community business owner. On July 1st, 2016, and on July 1st of each subsequent year, unless a party has provided a notice of non-renewal as provided below, the term of the agreement shall be extended without further action by the parties for an additional year, and they call that an automatic renewal, so that the term of the agreement shall remain at a minimum of 12 years. Okay, so just to rephrase that, in 2016, the new term would start. If there was no notice sent to CR&R by the City of El Centro, that would add on 1 year to the 12-year extension. In the business, this is known as an evergreen clause. It keeps rolling over, rolling over, rolling over. And so in 2017, 2018, if the city hasn't sent in a formal notice to CR&R, now the expiration date is 2030. So I'm here to just make that clear. That is the obligation. That's the expiration. That's the way the agreement's written. I really want to make sure that we slow down the process and investigate exactly what's being requested, because we are interested in competing for your business and competing for the city's business. The other thing that we want to talk about is the rate adjustment and landfill fees. We had a disposal agreement with CR&R for 4 years. There was provisions in that agreement to continue that relationship. CR&R decided not to. In fact, I personally received a letter from that organization saying that they would like to terminate that relationship. CR&R, the consequences of that decision does not fall on CR&R. It falls on your constituents. You have approximately 25,000 residents, and I'm just throwing a number, it's got to be somewhere in that ballpark. It's going to take $1.50 increase. We just got done talking about the times, the economic times, and how tough it is for everyone, and the budget. Mr. Edney, the budget. Well, we all have budgets. $1.50 is significant when you consider there's 25,000 people that it's going to hit. In addition, you're looking at $7.50. $7.50 to your commercial small business accounts. You're looking upwards, if you just do the math, and you're taking on street sweeping, and we get that, it's $200,000 there, savings to the city. But if you just do the math for the rate adjustment, you're looking at, $600,000 to the folks in the city of El Centro. They're going to bear the burden of that. So, it needs to be understood, and I respectfully request that we go through the process. We docket this issue. We really look into all the details. We give it its due attention. and keep in mind, in 2027, if you've sent your notice in by 2016, you can't solicit any business. Your hands are tied. That's just not healthy. That's not an obligation that you really want to have. My third and final point. In 2007, we lost the franchise agreement, the solid waste services agreement for the city of El Centro. Okay? And the residents had the opportunity during the time that we were servicing the city that they could actually use our landfill for free. That resource, that advantage has been taken away. And if we extend this or even entertain this request, that's going to continue to be taken away. So when we look at this, and we look at the $200,000 in savings, hopefully we can look at a bigger picture and be very honest with ourselves. There's a lot to read here. It took me all day to read it, quite frankly. And I think before we make a decision like that, I'd ask that we, either have a public hearing or really go through and fully investigate the situation. In conclusion, I'll say one last thing. Across the board in the solid waste industry, we are not seeing municipal rates go up. We're seeing them go down. In fact, we're seeing them stabilize, right? Even with additional services like street sweeping or what have you, we're seeing in these hard economic times, with unemployment being where it's at right now, we're seeing those rates actually stabilize and go down. In fact, the current supplier operates out of Orange County. We have seen rate stabilization with their franchise agreements in Orange County. So what I would ask is, if it works in Orange County, why can it not work in Imperial Valley, in the city of El Centro? Thank you for your time.
I need to ask you a question because if I heard CRNR correctly, and I do think an 8% increase is quite large, but they're basically blaming you for 5.3% of that 8%.
Right.
And landfill costs that are close to double to what they perceive to be normal landfill charges. Can you address that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, quite frankly, we haven't adjusted our gate rates at the landfill since January of this year. That's not what this is about. Again, I have to reiterate, and what I've done here, City Clerk, if you wouldn't mind passing this around for me again. I've brought your consultant's synopsis and assessment of the situation. It kind of goes through everything. The part that I like to bring attention to is where they say, the contract between, it's the last, I guess it'd be 2 paragraphs up from the bottom. The contract between CR&R and Allied Imperial Landfill had continuation provisions, unless a party notified the other of the intent to terminate. CR&R, for whatever strategic reasons they have, indicated, or CR&R, chose to terminate that arrangement. The financial consequence of that decision will fall fully on your ratepayers. That's the reality of it. Now, we understand there's some infrastructure development in the city of El Centro with a transfer station. And rates will come down, but there's a lot of what ifs there, and the disposal market is constantly fluctuating. So I wouldn't necessarily bank on that, and I wouldn't sign a 20-year agreement, 30-year agreement, because the disposal rates could go down, disposal rates could go up, disposal rates could go down. The fact of the matter is it's a volatile market. Supply and demand change all the time. And you need some assurance as a city on what those rates are going to look like.
You gotta follow up.
Yeah.
Mr. Rickman, I don't think you answered the question, though.
Okay.
Okay, I read what you say here, but the fact of the matter is, your company raised the rates $6 a ton,
No, we didn't.
right? 47 to 54.
Yeah. Our rates, we had a disposal agreement with CR&R from $47.
I don't want to get into your dispute between your agreement or your negotiations. The
Okay.
question is, they were paying 47, they're now going to be paying 54.
As a result of not having an agreement, they are now paying our gate rate of
Okay.
$52.
Now you're putting us in the middle of your negotiations. I just asked a simple question. They were paying 47, they are going to be paying 54. Correct?
Councilman Randy, that is correct.
Okay. So regardless of the reasoning, they are seeing an increase, which goes to what the mayor asked you, which was 5% of this increase is directly related to those gate rates. Whether it's your fault or their fault, I'm not asking. I'm just saying that seems to be correct statement, correct?
The rate adjustment justification is that the disposal cost for CR&R has gone up. Our cost to CR&R has gone up. That is absolutely correct.
So-
Do we run the most out of market in terms of price? Do we have the highest pricing for landfills? No, I don't think that's a fair accusation at all. In fact, I think we run a pretty competitive landfill. There are other options. There are county landfills. CR&R just spoke about Yuma disposal as well over there 50 miles down the road. But I do not believe that our rates are out of market. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the business.
Let me try to expand on what Mr. Rennie said, because it is important to me. The increase in landfill assessment had to do with the fact that you did not get an agreement, or explain that to me a little
Sure,
differently.
We had a 4-year disposal agreement with CR&R. It expires July 1st of this year. There is provisions in that agreement for a renewal unless one party or the other notified each other of their intention to terminate that agreement. We did not make that action. CR&R did.
So they send you a notice intending to terminate the agreement?
Exactly, correct.
And that triggered a raise?
That triggered no agreement.
Triggered renegotiation.
Yeah. Okay, but the question that I have to kind of piggyback from the mayor is, if CR&R had not elected to terminate the agreement, what would they have been locked into in terms of renewal? Number of years, rate, what have you?
That's a what if. It would have been determined. We would have sat down and negotiated that.
I
Determined
thought you
what.
said that there were renewal options contained in the
Oh, I
agreement.
apologize. I misunderstood your question. There were renewal options to continue. I don't have that agreement in front of me. It was, I think, another year-to-year agreement.
Any additional questions for
No.
Mr.
We appreciate him coming
Yeah,
forward,
thank you.
though.
Well, I
giving us-
had a question.
for him?
Yes, you mentioned that El Centro residents now pay at the landfill?
El Centro residents no longer have free disposal at the landfill, so if they would like to take their garbage to the landfill in a pickup truck or what have you, they do pay the gate rate.
But that started the day after
That started in
CNR,
2007, as soon as the day after, exactly.
because I got
correct.
caught in that.
And that was
I had
a,
to pay $40 for my
Did
truck.
you?
that was a business decision made by Allied?
As a benefit to our cities that we do business with, the residents are entitled to use our landfill for free of charge.
So
So-
because the contract was terminated with the city of El Centro, then our residents
Were excluded from that benefit.
were excluded.
Correct.
I see.
But, you know, I do want to be, I guess I really want to be clear on the term. It is very unclear. And it is a lengthy term. And when this whole council's gone and the new council's here, it's still going to be the same contract, still going to be the same provider. And
Thank
that-
you.
Mr. Trying to get
Thank
rid
you.
of us.
Well, I would like to ask, thank you.
I would like.
I would like to ask City Attorney's Office with regard to that automatic adding a couple of years. Why is that language there?
Why are we tacking on additional years so that it's like a rolling contract, always have 12 years in front of us?
That's what was negotiated.
Would the rates change if we negotiated simply having a contract that ran through July 1st, 2027?
That would have to be, I think, a separate discussion with them. That's why we have two items here. One is the rate, and one is the extension of the contract. If there are items within the contract that would like to be deferred back to the task force and staff, we would do that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Comments?
Well, I'd like to ask Mr. Ruffridge a couple questions.
Mr. Who? Oh, Mr. Ruffridge, okay.
I'll just say this, and I would have said it later, but since it's been brought up, there's no way, and I'll tell this to my council colleagues, that I will vote for a contract extension that has this evergreen clause in it. I deal with this with all kinds of companies, and basically the burden is on us, the owner or the landlord or whatever you want to call it, to make to keep in mind that 15 down the year, or 5 years down the year, you have to notify them in writing. They've tried to do that on laundry service contracts, and I think that's just an ill way to do business. You want to negotiate a contract for 15, 16 years? Negotiate a contract for 16 years. You can always come back in 12 years and renegotiate a longer term if you're still happy with that. To make it indefinite, no way. I'm concerned about the cost increase. The reason I brought you up, I'm concerned about the cost increase. 8% is a huge amount. It's a huge amount at any time. I run a small business, real estate property management company. I would believe that most of you in this room understand that it's not a really good time to be a realtor, is it? Now, I have employees. I have costs of insurance and payroll, and those are going up. I'm not passing those costs on to my clients. So I understand the need for a raise. This is the third raise in a row. And I understand your contract allows you to come in and request an increase. And I'm going to tell you, I'm likely to vote for the increase based on the cost of landfill. But I'm going to say, I'm not going to come in here every year and have whatever cost that CR&R absorbs, regardless of what the consultant says. Because you know what? My business costs have gone up too. But I don't automatically get to go to my clients who I have contracts with and say, well, I'm sorry, my cost went up this year, so you're eating a 3% higher commission to me. It doesn't work that way. So it's not going to be automatic to me on this. I understand what you're trying to do. I expect that we're going to see some sort of reduction once the transfer station is put in. But I'm not going to see, I mean, the way this is going, we're going to see $70 a month trash rates. I mean, just compounded over the next 16 or 18 years at 3 or 4 or 5 or 6% annually. We've got to get these costs in control, or unfortunately CR&R, like every other business, is going to have to pick up some of the costs for a couple years, right? Think that's a fair point? Probably not, huh?
I would like to comment on that if I could, Councilman Edney. In 2009, there was actually a rate reduction. That rate reduction was implemented in 2010, and for 12 months, CR&R totally ate that $2 increase for that year and never came back and asked for that reimbursement. So there has been some give and take on this contract in the past, sir. And the other thing I'd like to point out is in 2006, Allied had the opportunity, as CR&R did, as two other companies did, to bid this contract. This contract was a very formal contract. You hired probably one of the most professional firms in California to administer the bidding of this contract, and they came up with certain rules and certain parameters that were all taken into consideration in the bidding. And one of those was the rate adjustment mechanism on an annual basis going forward for the 10-year term. Now, our bid was considerably less than Allied's bid. It was fair, it was square. And I'm a little concerned about the Allied gentleman coming up here and crying over spilled milk that he wants another bid opportunity because he wasn't low enough last time. I think it's ridiculous. Had the city taken his higher bid, because the city could have taken a higher bid, as you know, it was a proposal, not a bid process. You did not have to take the lowest bid. Your rates would be considerably higher today based upon the rate methodology. The adjustments would be the same on his rates as they have been on CR&Rs. So from that sense, this council, this city, has saved the residences and the businesses a considerable amount of money in the last 4 years, even with the 3 adjustments that were made.
Fair statement, Mr. Etheridge, but I'm just going to point out, you can come in and request the bid, doesn't mean this council has to approve it, the increase. And unless I'm mistaken, then the city attorney can explain that to me, because I mean, name me another business that automatically, whatever their costs go up, they just get to come in and get more money.
Well, I agree with you 100%, although, excuse me, when the numbers are put together on an RFP like this, and each one of the 4 companies put their numbers together based upon knowing what they could expect with their crystal ball, assuming what the PPIs and the CPIs and the fuel indexes would be in the next 10 years. So our crystal ball worked one way, theirs may have worked a different way.
Well, I'm in no way talking about the other company. I'm talking about your company. We're not going to automatically, you can't automatically expect that whatever cost increase CR has, this council is just going to approve it and pass it on to the ratepayers.
I agree with you.
That was my point. I'm not getting into that. That's past, as you said. But every year, you can't go through CNR's books and say, well, our costs went up 3%, so let's go get 3% from them.
I hear you.
I don't get to do that, and I can't find one other business in this town that automatically passes on whatever their costs. Sometimes they get them, sometimes they get more, sometimes they don't get. The market should derive that,
Agreed.
not just some unilateral, I want more money.
Agreed.
Let me
but I-
expand on something that Mr. Redney said, Luis, on the flexibility that the council has. Let's say hypothetically the council was to say, no, we're not going to approve this increase. Then what?
Well, actually, I would need to review the agreement. I don't recall what the language provides in terms of any kind of mandatory duty with regard to rate adjustments.
I think, Mr. Mayor, if the council is inclined not to accept this, I would suggest that we refer it back to committee and back to staff before we actually say we would not approve it. I want you to clearly understand that we had city attorney in the presence with us, the city manager was with us in this negotiation with CR&R, as well as a finance director. We had the public works director and his key staff persons. We looked at this carefully with the understanding that, yes, while the rate increase was there, and I can understand the position of Allied, and I understand the positions of my colleagues, but those of us who were in that room felt that the benefit that was going to be shared by the collective members of this community would be great. We were looking for savings overall. Which is going to be explained. We were looking for some additional service, and we felt there would be some level of efficiency. So if the council is inclined not to agree with this, I would suggest they go back to committee before we actually disapprove it.
Mr. Mayor, this fellow, I'm not necessarily against approving it. I want to know, and it appears that maybe Ms. Sanders' solution is the only one, because we don't have a clear answer as to what we have the authority to do on a raise, and I haven't heard any discussion concerning the term extension that I think is problematic.
Okay.
So unless we're ready to
Let's
modify
go
it.
back. Let's go back, if you would, Mr. Hagan, to that frame that specifies the cost savings over that 20-year period, and that was a question that was raised initially by Mr. Solomon as to exactly what are we going to get for this, and it was, and he says, is that going to offset? I think. Excuse me. How far are you going back?
Let's see.
Okay.
I was going to go back and talk about the indices.
Okay, the indices.
Okay, and
the insurance
these
disclosure
are
waiver.
indices that are published independent of CR&R or what they spend or cost. And when HF&H helped us set up the contract, they established formulas to use these indices, and there could be either rate reductions or rate increases depending on the economics going on in the nation. So it's this annual adjustment is based on outside indices, not what CR&R wants to submit. It's just independent.
So
My
what,
point, Mr. Hagan, just to clarify was, if your costs go up running your business, you can look at all kinds of outside indices. That doesn't mean you're going to automatically get them. If you run a shoe store, and the cost of leather, and the cost of gasoline, and the cost of this, through all these indices go up, does that mean you get to raise the price of your shoe $7 automatically every year? We don't know.
I believe the contract is written in such a way that we're obligated to pay these, but
Well,
I'll leave
that's
that
a
up to the
concern.
city attorney.
No,
to
I think
determine.
this is one of the things, because they're, generally, I believe that's what the contract says, but there's usually something else in the contract, and it's why we would like to be able to review the full contract with a city attorney and a public works director on the issue of the indices and how they work. That is one item. The extension of the contract really needs to be a separate, and could even be should be, given this information, a different council meeting. Because there's issues here for us to deal with. And also, if there are concerns about the overall contract in the extension process, if there's a desire for that, we can also address things such as this, that if there's a concern of how this has been developed, we can talk about that in a contract extension. But we first of all want to make sure that the rate, what we're bringing to you, is consistent and what the parameters are within the current contract. And we think we can get that back to you.
I will tell you that I would like to know that, because my inclination from the beginning of this is that the 8% was just excessive. And given our economic conditions, our employment, our per capita income, all these economic factors that are hitting us hard, would be hard for me to justify giving someone an 8% increase in contract. Really bothered by the potential of a 12-year extension on a contract. I was really bothered by that, and I could not support that given what I know right now. So if that's if might be appropriate to come back and look at this in 2 weeks, send it back, that's fine.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I would suggest if you're going to do anything, that you at least continue the public hearing with regard to the rate adjustment, and then also we can look at the question as to the any obligation on the part of the city to mandatorily or without any discretion to adjust the rates based on the indices as have been presented. I'm just not familiar with the contract enough to give you any kind of definitive answer.
I want to again, if I may, Mr. Mayor, speak to the fact that the consultant that was hired when this contract was lent some number of years ago looked all of this over, and the gentleman that brought the information up did point out for us, CR&R indicated that they chose to terminate this arrangement. The financial consequences of this decision will fall upon the city's ratepayers, not CR&R. And that is the agreement of not to pay that excessive tipping fee. I'm sorry, I call it a tipping fee, but it's for that landfill. And so we did have another set of eyes looking at this, the same consultant. So if the council is not inclined to agree, I would hope, Mr. Mayor, that we would consider sending it back for us to
And I think
get a
that's a
second look at.
recommendation from our attorney, I think. Correct?
Yes, so to be continued.
So continue the public hearing, sir.
The two comments I have is I would appreciate a look at whether or not this is an automatic adjustment. I do appreciate, and I think he is very sincere with regard to if the tipping fees were to go down, that there would be a corresponding decrease with regard to the rates paid. I think that our experience to date with CR&R has been extremely positive.
Yes.
I think that they've provided exceptional customer service. I've been very, very pleased with the contract and with the quality of the folks who have been assigned to our account. I do, though, agree with Mr. Edney. What I do is review contracts all day, and I agree I would not include an evergreen provision that would tack on years, year after year. If our consultant believes that a 12-year contract is fair, in order for there to be a return on investment for the street sweeping, then let's build in the 12 years and call it a day.
So, Mr. Mayor, what action are we taking? What is this, we have two items before us for action. One is...
Right, we would suggest you deal with them separately, but they both be continued.
Okay.
Let me hear from Mr. Buckman really quickly, though.
Council members, I just want to say quickly, Mr. Edney, you bring up good points with the cost indices always coming up. I would encourage everyone to look at clause 6.4 of the original solid waste agreement, because it specifically outlines the cost indices that will be hit every year. The tradition has been for us to tie it to CPI. When CPI is negative, we don't request an increase, or we even take a step back and a decrease. With the city of Brawley, for example, we just approached them for a 33-cent increase. It was not awarded to us, but that was a request. The way the agreement's written now that you have, and the way it would continue, is that those indices are something you'd be responsible for. So I just encourage 6.4, that whole portion, those 2 pages where it goes over rate adjustments. I'd encourage you to read that.
Thank you. So it sounds like there's a desired consensus from the council to continue the public hearing to our June 21st meeting?
I'm sorry, this actually is not a public hearing, it was I misread this, but it's just to continue the matter to June 21st.
Okay.
Right, and we may, intent is to bring back the rate, and we'll also notify if we're in position to bring back the contract discussion. We'll indicate that to you prior to the agenda. If we're ready, we will, but just understand we may wind up on a different night. Okay. Thank you.
Let's hear the medical marijuana.
So you'll be...
Okay. Is that enough, Mr. Hernandez?
You will notify those of us on the committee of any meetings that you're going to have? Will you notify
Oh,
those
yes,
of us?
I'm sorry. I thought he was...
Oh, you couldn't tell where the voice was coming from. Yoo-hoo. Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Duran.
It's all right. I've got documentation that says that I really can't hear it.
Okay, thank you.
So yes, we'll notify the task force and pull back together on both issues.
Thank
But
you.
there'll be different tracks.
Okay, let's move on to item number 19, which is a continued public hearing, proposed adoption of medical cannabis dispensaries ordinance, presentation by our Director of Planning and Zoning. And Norma, we're just going to focus on the 2 issues that we talked about, right? We don't even have to rehash the whole thing.
That's correct. Thank you. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the council. As you may recall, this is a continued hearing regarding our proposed ordinance for the medical cannabis ordinance. At the last meeting, there were a couple of issues that were brought up that staff received direction to go back and get some clarification. One of those issues was the retail sale of cannabis edibles. Basically, that was in response to a letter that we received from the Imperial County Health Department basically stating that the health department will not be issuing permits for kitchens within a dispensary. After the meeting, staff communicated with the health department, and I may say that Mr. Jeff Lamore is here in the audience in case you have any questions regarding their opinion. What we received was basically that because the FDA does not recognize marijuana as a food additive, the county health department is taking the position that that's not going to be a permitting, they don't have any permitting standards for medical cannabis edibles. So they also referred us to the California Conference of Directors of Environmental Health, which is a white paper that the health department is following that basically says that because, again, cannabis is not recognized as as a food additive, the California Conference of Directors is basically stating that there are no, they have no standards, therefore that's what the county public works is following. So with that respect, after discussing this matter further, we recognize that there is a need to allow retail sales of edibles in dispensaries for members that are seriously ill and may not have the methods of means to produce the edible products. In that regard, we are recommending to change section 13-118, section D6, and remove the word appropriate and replace it with any applicable licenses or permits. So section 6 will read, a dispensary that provides cannabis in the form of food or other edibles shall obtain and maintain any applicable licenses or permits from the health department for providing food or other edibles. In that respect, we're not going to be allowing kitchens within the dispensaries. However, they would be allowed to sell edibles within the dispensaries. If in the near future the health department changes its policies and recognizes that they can permit edibles, medical cannabis edible, then they would be required to obtain the appropriate permit. The other issue that was brought up was regarding mobile dispensaries. The question was asked, about regulating whether there was some kind of provision within our code or within the health and safety code, whether that regulates mobile dispensaries. Well, there is under the health and safety code section 1136-2-768, mobile dispensaries are permitted. Now, within our ordinance, we do have a section within our ordinance that addresses delivery services, and that's in section 113-118. So basically, what the health and safety code says is that the city has the authority to provide more restrictive ordinance or policies on their location or establishment in the city. In that regard, we are already addressing that under section 2. Basically, our ordinance requires if for any delivery or transportation service of medical cannabis originating from outside of the city limits, they must be legally permitted and also must have a business license pursuant to section 1656 of the city code. That would address the issue about mobile dispensaries coming from outside of the city. Now, with our 2 permitted dispensaries, those 2 dispensaries would be allowed to provide mobile services within our city. So with that in mind, those were our conclusions. What we are asking is just a slight change to the section about permitting by the health department. And again, I have Mr. Jeff Lamore is here in the audience to answer any questions regarding their position.
Thank you. Who's Mr. Lamore here?
This is in the back.
Thank you for waiting, and apologize for the the delays. I have a question. In the last time we heard this, we had a pretty lengthy discussion over the whole issue of cannabis, but it focused down to this now. And we heard testimony from people that were surprised that the health department issued a directive that would not permit this kind of usage here, or the development or the preparation. And it seemed to be that they said that it was allowed in other counties and other locations. Can you tell us why there might be a distinction?
Yeah, Jeff Lamore with Imperial County Environmental Health. Yes, actually, the city of San Francisco, the county of San Francisco, is one agency that does actually permit dispensaries for edibles to be served, prepared and served. It's the position of this department, of the county, that, and under the guidance document that was provided by CCDEH, which the majority of the counties in the state of California follow, which they don't recognize it. It's not a recognized food additive, it's a drug. And we have no control, there's no way to control the concentration of the drug. And because of that, and its required labeling requirements, amongst other things, that in our ability to regulate and to assure that it's done, food is prepared in a safe manner, we can't do that. Our hands are tied. So with FDA determining that it is a drug, we're going to follow that requirement, or we're going to follow their guideline.
So it is a local call, even though that call you indicate it's been made throughout the state.
It is a local call. It's a recommendation, as I said, through the white paper, through the Directors of Environmental Health, which I am part of CCDEH. Correct. It falls to the local agencies to make that call, and that is our position.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, but if a dispensary is not operating a kitchen and the operator of the dispensary decides that they're going to either manufacture product at home or purchase from a third party and bring it on site, there's really no room for your department, is there, to come in and shut them down, or is there?
But keep in mind, there is a concern that if you have someone preparing food at their home, given you hope that the circumstances or their environment where they're preparing this food is done in a safe manner. If they prepare a food item that has tainted with bacteria and then provide that for sale to their customers, then you have the potential for a foodborne illness outbreak. So, you just always need to keep that in mind.
Is that why we shut down lemonade stands now?
Well, yeah, but let's
Haven't done that lately, but
let's
let me know.
let's look at the totality of the circumstance here,
Sure.
right? In terms of global outbreaks and global food issues with people contracting diseases and dying, we're not seeing it coming from somebody's kitchen into a medical marijuana dispensary, right? By and large, we're dealing with much bigger problems.
We're talking about a local issue. I realize you want to go globally with it, but we're talking about a local issue, and we're following what state guidelines have provided us, and that's what we enforce. So that's how we would look at this. Those are the things that we follow.
So are you
Again,
going to come in and shut these places down if they decide
that's not
to
our
have-
intent. If we do
Okay,
have a
that's-
foodborne, if there is a report of a foodborne illness, then obviously we'll investigate and we'll make whatever recommendations and take whatever action that we need to take. The appropriate action. But that's not our intent. Our intent is that, we don't believe that was the intent of the legislation, to have food prepared at dispensaries. Obviously, there's a definite need for that and for dispensaries and have that service available to their customers. We completely recognize that. But to branch out into the food realm or segment of it, that's where our concern is. So if
But
and
don't you
when,
see what a goofy catch-22 that's creating?
Sure.
Because instead of having it in a facility that's open to inspection for you to see what's going on, you're basically driving it into somebody else's kitchen that you don't have any control or inspection over.
again, we have no control or over the actual drug itself. So the food item, yes.
But you would have the opportunity to inspect a kitchen if it was allowed on site.
Again, we're missing the point that it is considered a drug. And because of that, we truly have no control over the actual ingredients of the food. I mean, we don't just go in and we will look at a variety of things, but we also do look at the ingredients that go into preparing food items. And this is one particular ingredient that we have no control over. And that's the position that the state has taken with that. If and when down the road FDA does decide to set up standards so that it can be considered a food additive, then at that point in time, we will look at regulating it and pulling it into the program.
I think you're missing my point with that.
If I could try, because I think this is really so important, we spend a lot of time with this. I'm going to take out an element, so maybe it'll help clarify. If it doesn't, I apologize. Please, Jeff, before you leave. Jeff, if the kitchen's put into a medical cannabis dispensary, and they just make cupcakes with nothing else in them but flour, eggs, sugar, they meet your standards, they can produce cupcakes. Am I correct?
Yeah, given that the facility, if they're
Yeah.
a retail food facility that
Retail food
meets our
facility,
standards
meets your
for
standards.
The kitchen itself is
Right.
designed to meet
So-
current standards.
So it comes to, it's not the preparation of food items, is that you're saying that you cannot permit a non-edible ingredient into the product.
Correct. Not necessarily it's not edible, obviously.
I mean, not
cannabis
edible,
can
but
be
not accept-
consumed,
not con-
but it's not considered, it is not looked at as a food additive. It is looked at as a drug.
And that's the catch-22, is yes, you can make cupcakes there,
That's my point.
but you can't,
The point
so,
is
yeah,
that instead
So-
of having a kitchen facility open for inspection,
yes.
we're gonna say no can do it at home where we have no control or oversight and allow it to be brought on site.
I'd like to ask a follow-up question then, because this comes up in other areas that we work with health. Food that is prepared in an unlicensed kitchen that is being sold in a retail establishment, what is your enforcement direction or that your department has on those kinds of issues?
We would issue a notice to cease and desist. We would stop that type of action.
So I'm going to use the example of the cupcake that just has basic ingredients.
Sure.
Somebody's making it in a non-registered kitchen, trying to sell those on a storefront. You say, wait a minute, where were those made? And it would come from a complaint, clearly. Otherwise, you wouldn't know. I think that's what, it keeps coming back to the issue of, it's the ingredient, because we have food like cookies and such, tamales, et cetera. We went through this with the taco cook-off, it needs to be made in a licensed kitchen. But because of this catch-22 that I think both parties are in, they can't license it. And I think it's a real dilemma, but it does drive. I agree. I wanted to make sure. So the issue is, as long as that ingredient's in there, you're saying you can't license it.
It's not under our purview.
What Mr. Lamore is suggesting, public health does not recognize cannabis as a food, they recognize it as a drug. And as a drug, they would not suggest that it be used as an edible. That's what you're trying to tell us, is it not, Mr. Lamore?
Not that it shouldn't be used as edible, that
Well, but
the way that
you
it's currently
cannot
structured.
license it.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, it goes to the point, though, that I think Mrs. Walker made an excellent point.
Yes.
It may be a drug, you may not be able to control it because it's not a food. But the point of the matter is, you still would have the ability to inspect the kitchen. So are we talking about doing what's better than nothing or doing nothing? And I think that's the problem with this. It's typical, we gotta follow the rule, some rule that somebody's wrote, some white paper, but we don't look at the reality. The reality is, somebody's gonna bring an edible marijuana, cannabis cupcake in there, and we don't know where it was made, what the conditions in the kitchen, or what products were used. Now, that's a problem for the health department, right? For the whole community,
Well,
potentially.
with that particular clientele, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
if you at least had the ability to inspect the kitchen, you'd at least be halfway home. Better than zero.
Correct.
And I think, if I can continue with the council, I think that is a separate discussion that should be occurring at the Board of Supervisors on this issue with the Public Health Department.
Yeah, Mr. Edney, you need to keep in mind, though, again, it is the position of the FDA and CDPH, California Department of Public Health. So there are other entities that look at this in the same light. I realize you have your perspective. Unfortunately, we do have to follow what the laws allow
The
for.
only perspective I have, Mr. Moore, is that we do what makes sense. I don't care what FDIC say, or FDA this, I don't care what they, I want to do something that makes practical, good sense, other than somebody going, up, the white paper or the policy that came out of this organization doesn't agree with this policy, so we just can't do it. That doesn't make sense to me.
And that's fine, and that's your perspective. But again, there's some concerns with regards to with it as a drug and being able to understand the actual makeup of the drug. I mean, with food additives, there are studies that are done, and they understand the concentration, the quality. There's a variety of things that go into looking at food additives, whether it's herbs or other things of that nature. And they go through a process. This has not entered that process. Therefore, it is a drug, and we can't, under our authority, we can't pull it into a food additive.
Well,
So that's the reality of it.
No, but it's not a solution, sir. That's my point. It's not a solution. It's just,
yeah.
we can't do anything about it. That's not a solution.
Mr. Solomon?
Isn't it true that the edible allows you to, from what I'm reading and finding out, that the edible allows you to stay higher longer than...
Don't know the outcome.
Okay. Well, I don't know either. That's why I'm asking you.
No, he doesn't want to go into the drug. So
It allows the patient to consume, it allows the patient
But my
to
understanding was that it allows you to maintain your high longer than someone that is just smoking weed from it.
I would
This is
defer to
not
the experts
intended,
in
this
those
is not
particular areas.
intended,
Wait a minute.
this is not in.
Second, well, I'll get you in a minute.
Excuse me, Gary Metelsky,
Well-
pharmacist, I'd just like to add
Yeah.
clarification to that.
Hold on, please, hold on. Well, I'll call you in a minute. Okay. I think the remaining of the councils throughout the valley have voted that they're not going to allow dispensaries. I think El Centro is the only council or city that is going to allow them. So I think if it's a local, I don't know if it's within your purview to change the policy of the, I don't think it is. But and being that El Centro is probably the only community that's going to allow this, and it being that it's a local call, who has the authority to look at this constructively and perhaps change the internal policy
When you say internal policy, you're
with
talking
the
about
policy of the Imperial County Health Department?
it's our position. Locally, if you're looking at bringing the cannabis into the realm of a food additive, then you need to go up to FDA and CDPH, and obviously work with the legislation to make changes in the way that they currently look at the requirements. Now, if you're looking at the bigger picture, but if you're looking at how can we basically have the Public Health Department, Division of Environmental Health, change their position. Obviously, we have elected officials, and I have a director, a department head that obviously you can talk to.
So that could be handled through the County Board of Supervisors?
You can talk to them. I mean, that's your prerogative to approach them and stress your concerns and your recommendations, and we'll have those discussions.
Okay.
Robin Hodgkins is the Director of Public Health.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah,
Campbell.
we-
There was a couple of hands that wanted to provide testimony. You want to come to the podium, sir? And, please state your name and address for the record. And then I want to need you to fill out one of these slips.
Gary Metelsky, pharmacist, 1840 Rodeo Drive, Imperial. Just to get a clarification on the duration of action of THC. When it's smoked, there's a combination of Delta 8 and Delta 9 THC, gives you an effect for anywhere from 1 to 2 hours. But by heating it, it changes the 5-carbon chain. And
You're getting
gives
way
it-
too technical for us.
Okay, edibles have a duration of action between 6 and 8 hours. Due to the heating used in the baking process, it changes a molecular structure, which gives it a longer half-life.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. But that's, you can actually overdose yourself. You seem to need more if you not get it yet. And
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you again. I believe...
Can you state your name and address
Oh,
for the
I'm
record?
sorry, my name is Patricia Smith. I'm with Grassroots Solutions, and I'm representing a person that is a local resident here in El Centro on James Street. I believe that you have already addressed the problem here because your ordinance states that every edible or medical marijuana product needs to be lab tested. If that is the case, everything will be certified safe for human consumption, so I don't really see the problem.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. I do have a request for, to provide testimony, Danielle McNish. That's you?
Thank you.
Somebody else wants to speak? Go ahead.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and fellow City Council members. I'm Danielle McNish. I live on 1110 Ocotillo Drive, and I'm representing the Imperial Valley Collective. I'm a member and a patient. Thank you for allowing time to listen and hear everything, and we're really happy with the way everything's looking. It's looking awesome. I think 2 weeks ago, we as members were really appalled by to hear that Desert Cannabis thinks they are above the city council, in our opinion. They don't think they have to abide by the moratorium set in place by city council. One other issue we had was about the testing. Having no way of getting the product to a testing facility, it's an issue. We have no way of getting it from El Centro out. I mean, and it's an issue we've talked about last time, so just wanted to make sure it was once again addressed. And as for the edibles, I mean, really no problem. It also benefits the patients in that we're promoting free classes. We'll promote free classes and education on the products as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are we done with the edible piece of this? Because I do want to talk about the mobile dispensaries for a second. Okay. Norma, when we did have a presentation by, can you remind me of your name? Olga. Where she indicated that they had been providing product to patients here in El Centro, and the question I had was if that was legal, because it didn't sound legal, even though Olga said that they did have the adequate state permits. And it sounds from your conclusion that if they did it before, they won't be able to continue doing it unless they're one of the two dispensaries that gets awarded a permit to operate.
Or if they have a legal, say, if this dispensary is out of Calexico, if they have a business license from the city of Calexico, then they would be allowed to and also all the state licenses required, they would be allowed to have their mobile services. That's the only way. They need to have a business license, and also, of course, a business license with the city of El Centro.
Mayor, if I want to clarify something very quickly, because I don't want to lose track of this. It's more than the business license. They have to be legally operating within that jurisdiction. Because you can have a business license to cut hair, but it doesn't mean you can do business, because this can be misconstrued. I want to make sure. They must have a legal authority to operate in that jurisdiction as a medical cannabis dispensary, and then they would pull a license with us to be an operator here. So it's very specific. They have to be licensed, which means the city of Calexico would have to go through the process or do some action as you're doing here, and that is not the case. So I don't want any misunderstanding. It's not just about our business license. It has to be appropriate. Am I correct?
That's correct, and that's addressed on item number 2.
Well, as far as I know, we're the only city that's allowing this, so that makes it pretty difficult.
Well,
Well, but it could be from Indio.
it could be from India or Palm Springs,
Desert,
Palm Desert.
San Diego or something. I mean, according to the way number 2 reads, it just, you have to be licensed and approved in a in another jurisdiction. And then come in and get a business license from the city.
Exactly.
Any other questions from the council? Modifications as being proposed by staff agreeable to everyone? If so, can I have a motion?
I'll move approval of ordinance number 11 dash, oh wait, this was a continued public hearing.
Yes, to continue.
Yes, thank you. Any additional testimony from the public? Okay.
Oh, I didn't catch who made the second. Yeah.
Can you state your name and address for the record? Yes.
Yes, my name is Olga Porter, and I live in 404 Giles, Calexico, California. So, in regards to how we are delivering, how are we able to operate legally, there's a provision in SB 420, the 376-2. I forget it, but it's that provision on the other slide. And it allows us to legally transport medical marijuana within our collective, for our collective members, within our own exclusive club of members. And also, you have to be state licensed, obviously, and I've submitted copies of my articles of incorporation, of my state business license, of my sales permit, and I have my taxes, but I've paid taxes ever since the first day we started. We pay quarterly to the State Board of Equalization, and we pay annually to the federal government. So we are compliant. She can show you, but there's a town in California called Iselton, California, and Sacramento, California, where they were licensing large-scale dispensaries, and they got a letter sent by them by the U.S. Attorney warning them that if they would give these large-scale dispensaries a license, the city council members could be brought up on federal charges. So, 3,000 square feet, I have 150 patients right now. So 150, you guys are looking at it like times 6 plants times 6 plants per patient. Well, that equals 900 plants, and each plant can yield from 1 to 5 ounces. So even if you multiply it by 3 ounces, you would get 2,700 ounces, and then you divide that by 16 ounces in a pound. That large-scale farmer would be producing 168 pounds a month in a perpetual harvest, because the farmer would set it up as a perpetual harvest. So 168 pounds a month, me being here a year delivering, we don't have enough patients for 168 pounds a month. It's unfathomable. It would promote diversion to the black market. That dispensary owner wouldn't know what to do with all those ounces. He would price them really low. And if you have people like some people that are applying that have fathers with refrigerated warehouses, you have to think about that, licensing a large-scale farmer like that. Like I've said in the last meeting, where Mr. Edney wasn't here, but I said in the last meeting, we would always keep, our dispensary would always keep it under the federal amount. The federal legal amount is 99 plants, but we wouldn't go that far. We would probably keep it at 70 plants, and that's a more realistic number of plants for our community. And I just wanted you guys to think about that and keep that in mind. I know that you guys didn't get my email. I sent it May 19th or something like that, but so Rosie has it if you want to take a look at it. And I just don't want the city of El Centro to be exposed to a federal investigation, and maybe your city attorney can elaborate a little bit on that for you guys before you license a large scale farm.
Thank you. Any additional testimony from the?
Oh, about edibles, I'm sorry. I talked to Mr. Jeff Limmer also, and he told me the same thing that was said here. I do appreciate you, every effort that you guys have done for the edibles. Where a responsible dispensary owner would make sure that they're edible, if they do get them from a third party, they would make sure that they are from come from a licensed kitchen. And the way that the edible manufacturers do that is they rent out a licensed kitchen from a restaurant or something. You know, so after hours they'll go there and they'll prepare their edibles. That's how the edible manufacturers do it now. And then there is labeling. There is how much dry equivalent to dry cannabis is in the package of a brownie or a tea bag or cookie. There is labeling, and these reputable locations are Serve Safe certified or Clean Green certified through the health department first. So that's where a responsible dispensary owner, would get their edibles from, if it's not from a licensed kitchen in their dispensary, as who we were talking about earlier. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you please state your name and address for the record?
Dan Osborne, 2205 James Road, El Centro. And I enjoyed Olga's, what she had to say. I appreciate her business. I've been a patient for hers for over a year now. So the nonprofit, I'm sorry. Yes, but I've been a patient, and they definitely do a good service here. And if they were closed down, that would be sad, because there would be several patients out of medication and be in pain. But anyway, what I came up here to talk about was the grow area. We currently have a dispensary, and we have about 1,800 patients, and that would equate to, of course, thousands and thousands of plants if we wanted to do that. But we tend to run through sometimes 2 pounds a day servicing our patients. And so I can understand the small scale, but there's a larger scale that's needed for dispensaries who have 1,000 or 2,000 patients. Does that facilitate this area? I don't know, but the 3,000 square foot would be there to assist. There's different ways to grow. Some people have certain plants that take up more square footage than others. I've personally grown hundreds of plants. We've got a master grower on staff, as well as a chef, a professional chef on staff for our edibles. So, and we can also do the testing. So all these components can be put together if the right company, nonprofit organization has the appropriate resources.
Okay, I have to ask a question. You say you have a dispensary, and where's the dispensary at?
That's in Palm Desert.
Oh, okay, it's not in El Centro.
No, it's not in El Centro.
How many do we have in El Centro? We're not supposed to have any.
No.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right.
Any other testimony?
Exactly.
Okay, I want to close the public hearing.
I was planning to put it in my backyard.
Council ready to make a motion on this?
Approval of ordinance number 11 to be determined, an ordinance of City Council, City of El Centro, amending the city code by adding Article 7, Chapter 13, establishing regulations and procedures for medical cannabis dispensaries.
Second.
Moved by Walker, second by Sanders. Please ballot.
Motion passes.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the budget. I know that, I think there's something in the ordinance. Oh, yes, thank you. Item 20, continuing public hearing, zoning ordinance text amendment 1101 to allow a zoning ordinance text amendment of the commercial zones use regulations in order to add an unlisted use entitled medical cannabis cooperative and collective dispensaries, including cultivation, processing, and distribution in certain commercial zones in the city. Is there any need for council to hear from Mr. Icaña?
No changes from what's been previous.
So,
Then just,
continue public hearing. Any member of the audience that wishes to provide testimony on this? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Is council ready to make a motion?
Move for approval of ordinance number 11 to be determined, an ordinance of City Council of City of El Centro amending Chapter 29 of the Code of the City of El Centro by amending Section 29-28 of Division 2, Article 1, entitled Definitions, by adding subsection A6 to Table 29-61.1 of Section 29-61, Division 3, Article 2, entitled Commercial Zones Use Regulations, by adding subsection A11 to Section 29-305 of Division 4, Article 4, entitled Site Plan Review, and by amending subsections 2D3 and 2E3 of Section 29-306 of Division 4, Article 5, entitled Site Plan Review Procedure.
second.
Moved by Walker, second by Sanders. Please ballot.
Motion passes.
Okay, next item on the agenda is review, approve, receive, and approval of the annual budget for 2012. I think that there's something in the ordinance that says that if we go past a certain time, the council has to agree to continue.
At 9:30,
9:30. I don't know if we would be detrimental, Mr. Duran, to move this item to our next, how does the July 21st agenda look? I'm sorry, June 21st.
It's, because of the labor items, it could be very busy, but it's like everything else. There's no way of avoiding it. So if you wanted to extend this, because it is late in the hour, and we haven't gotten to the RDA.
Right.
And even on that item, point is, you can continue it on. 'Cause this is, it's a large budget. Want to make sure you're clear on
the
it.
council to continue this to June 21st?
yes.
Yes. Okay.
And, Mr. Mayor, if I may make,
Wait, is staff proposing now? Tomorrow?
Sure.
Oh, tomorrow.
Well, we can schedule a special meeting if it's.
Well, they continue this meeting.
Is that even possible?
Could they continue the meeting till tomorrow?
we could we continue
Case
it?
this meeting.
We could continue it.
Before your next meeting.
We could, I'm sorry?
Okay, let's take a 3-minute break, and we'll continue this.
Meeting called, recess.
So what is the board elected to do with regard to document?
5 minutes.
Ma-
No, 3 minutes. We could do it in 2 minutes. The living wage report is on the report to number 24.
Meeting reconvene at
Mr.
10:45.
Edney, are you ready? Okay, thank you.
You're going to do living wage.
We're moving 24 up ahead of the budget. The mayor has given me permission to do
Please go.
that. Thank you. As you know, Mr. Edney and I were a member of the task force that was looking at this, and we had said that we would come back on an annual basis to revisit it. Based on all of the information that we have, the indices that the CPI did not go up, so we're recommending no change, that it remains the same, and we'll revisit it again in another year. Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, none. You had anything to add, Mr. Edney?
I concur.
Thank you.
Okay, it sounds like the consensus from the council is to
Oh,
continue.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
There's a question on our report here.
There's no question. I just would like to thank the council for doing their due duty on this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to stay for the budget, sir? You know, we have all these important items, and yet, you know, in 8 years on this council, nobody ever wants to stick around for the budget.
If you'd like to go ahead and do the contracts first.
So, is it the desire of the council to go ahead and finish the agenda then?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you taking us
We
to
have a need-
breakfast at midnight?
We have a need to approve a number of contracts that were discussed in closed session. That will be the contract for the certified wastewater treatment plant operator, city manager, chief of police, director of planning and zoning, director of economic development, director of parks and recreation, director of finance, library director, director of public works, and city engineer. You have those resolutions in front of you, but we discussed them earlier. Do we do that as a group?
Yeah, you know, and for time's sake, I would say that you could, since they're all resolutions, you can do it all with one motion, like a consent, almost.
I'll make a motion to approve
The
the
resolutions for
aforementioned
the- you don't have a
contract
copy?
stated by the mayor.
Second.
Moved by Edney, second by Sanders. Please ballot.
You need to,
I also wanted to
Oh, wait a
ask,
minute. Do we take a vote?
yes, we did. Didn't we?
yes.
Oh, don't
Maybe I
worry.
didn't.
Okay, there it goes. Motion passes.
I also wanted to ask the council, is there a copy of a letter addressed to Mr. Manuel Perez in front of you?
Yes.
It's a letter, I received an email from Rosanna Moore asking the council if the council could submit a letter to Mr. Perez in regards to AB 99 and possible reductions of first five programs and funding. And I think this is being acted upon by the legislature in the next few days, and wanted to send a letter on behalf of the city asking our assembly member to not support the repeal of AB 99.
Did he vote on
We would
this
have to.
already? Has he voted on this once and we're asking him to reconsider? Is this one of the ones?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. But the timing of this would require us to add this as an emergency item and authorization for me to sign this letter because it's being sent on behalf of the city of El Centro. And I'd like to ask the council if you consider adding this item as an emergency item. Moved by Walker, second by Solomon. Please ballot on the emergency item. Okay, it's
Just for the record, the need to take action arose after the agenda was posted, and
Correct.
apparently there's an apparent, I'm sorry if I said apparent, but immediate need to take action.
Motion passes.
Okay. Now, is there a motion to approve the submittal of the letter?
Second.
Moved by Walker, second by Sanders. Please ballot.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Okay. Item 23, approve, receive, and file the City of El Centro's annual budget for fiscal year 2012. Leti Salcido is going to do it quickly.
Adequately.
This is what's sad. This is the biggest item that's going to set the roadmap for what we do for the remaining year. And poor Leticia is having to present it quickly.
It's only $105 million.
That's what
Okay. Welcome to our third budget workshop. Today, I'll be presenting to you the city manager's balanced budget for fiscal year 2011-2012. What I want to say is that in spite of the downturn in the economy at the federal, state, and local level, and the major loss in revenues to the city, I am very happy that we have good news. And that is that we are able to bring to you a balanced budget with no layoffs and no furloughs. Yes. The city budget for all funds totals $105 million, and it includes all of the funds for the city. That's the general fund, which is dedicated for general operations, enterprise funds such as water and wastewater, and then the special revenue and capital projects funds, which are monies that come in from other agencies and are designated for specific purposes. The total budget of $105 million is allocated as follows. There is $46 million for operations. There is $6.5 million allocated for debt service. That's for the water and wastewater bond issue issued in 2006, as well as the LTA debt service for the bond issue. Ooh, I need to wake up. We have also allocated for solid waste $1.6 million and $51.1 million for capital improvements. Again, the majority of the capital improvements, the money's coming in from other agencies. Those are from special revenue funds and are designated and restricted for those specific purposes. Cannot be used for anything else, for example, general operations. In regards to the general fund, it totals $23.7 million, of which 79% or $18 million is allocated for salaries and benefits. The $23 million is allocated as follows. 62%, the majority of it is allocated for public safety, that's police and fire, and that totals approximately $15 million. The next allocation is for general government at 12%, or $2.8 million, 11% for parks, recreation, and library, 11% for public works, which equals approximately $2.6 million. Community development, 2% of the $23 million, and then transfers out for other post-employment benefits at 2% of the total. While we are bringing to you a balanced budget for fiscal year 2012, there was various challenges in the preparation of this budget. We had both the short-term challenges as well as the long-term challenges. One of the major challenges is that we continue to operate with a reduced level of revenues within the general fund. As an example, during the fiscal year 2008 to 2010, the city lost a total of $4.1 million. That's 17% of our revenues lost within 2008 to 2010. From 2011 and 2012, again, for 2011, we're projecting an increase of $572,000, and then for 2012, an additional $228,000. However, the total of those two is only $800,000. So we're recuperating $800,000 on the 4.1 that we lost during these 3 years. We are still approximately $3.4 million below the levels we were before the economic collapse.
Okay, and these losses was based on what revenue stream?
This is revenue stream, mainly property sales tax,
Property and
number
sales
one.
tax.
Property taxes,
Okay.
yes. The other major challenge is that as a result of that reduction in revenues, we continue to operate with reduced allocations for the various departments. As you recall, back in 2010, when we had that drastic decline in revenues, we went ahead and did some mid-year cuts within all the departments. And we continue to operate at those reduced levels. The other challenge is that we continue to operate with reduced levels of staffing. As you recall, back in 2010, we froze 7 positions. Well, 6 of those positions will continue to be frozen in next year's fiscal year budget at a total savings of $646,000. The other major challenge is the state of California budget crisis. As you know, the state continues to have budget problems, not able to balance their budget, and as a result, they propose various items. One of them is the elimination of the redevelopment agency for next year. Such an action would impact the general fund to the tune of $1.1 million. That's various programs that are currently being financed through the redevelopment. Should the city want to continue with those programs, would have to be funded out of the general fund.
So that would be the potential loss to the general fund. Also, the state of California is proposing the elimination of the COPS grant. The city normally, or for the past few years, has been receiving $100,000, which is normally used for for funding one CSO position. That $100,000 would be lost as a result of this new action by the state. Another challenge for fiscal year 2012 is the one-time deposit for liability insurance to the Joint Powers Insurance Authority for next year. And finally, for fiscal year 2012 is the annual contribution for other post-employment benefits in the amount of $1 million, $800,000 from the general fund. In regards to long-term challenges, we have two, but they are major. The number one up here is the increase in operational cost of $2.5 million for the new projects that are coming on board within the next 3 years. Those projects are the fire station number 3, skate park, aquatic center, and the sports pavilion. While these projects are being constructed or will be constructed out of special revenue funds, the funding needed for operations will have to come from the general fund. The other major challenge is the increase in CalPERS in the amount of $3.7 million projected within the next 5 years. That's per an actuarial study. As you know, the city currently pays the employee and the employer portion of CalPERS. For example, for a safety employee, the city pays a combined 56.552% towards CalPERS for their retirement, at a total cost to the general fund of $3.4 million. For a miscellaneous employee, the city pays a combined of 15.54% at a cost to the general fund of $788,000. Out of the general fund, we're currently allocating $4.2 million towards retirement. That combined with the amount that we pay out of the other funds, the total amount budgeted for next year is $4.6 million. Now, the projected increase, if we add the projected increase of $3.7 million, that means that by 2016, the amount needed to cover all, if we were to stay on the same, at the same level, the amount needed for retirement costs to CalPERS would be $8.4 million. As mentioned before, this is a balanced budget. That means that revenues are sufficient to cover our operating expenditures for next year with a net of 0. That means that we would be we're projecting to end the year at $5.6 million. And the $5.6 million is allocated as follows. We have an amount of $2.8 million for economic unknowns. My pointer doesn't work. Of $2.8 million for economic unknowns. We have $800,000 allocated for accrued leave liability and $2 million for the replacement of vehicle and major equipment replacement. Now the $2 million, this right here, really in a perfect world should be $12.7 million. It should really equal the amount of accumulated depreciation. That means that we're building up to the amount that we will need to replace all that equipment at the end of its life.
So we
yes.
have 12 million
accumulated
depreciation.
Yes.
But we're only able to, so we're 10 million under.
Yes, we have $2 million allocated for replacement of vehicle and major equipment replacement. However, the accumulated depreciation is $12.7 million. We're at, with our total capital has a remaining life of approximately 18%. So that is one area where we need to start building up. It should be noted that if the economy continues to decline, we will need to reduce expenditures further. However, we are currently operating at minimum levels. That means that the next step will most likely have to be a reduction in services or a reduction in personnel costs. We must continue to position finances in a manner that we will be able to absorb the increase in expenditures from both the new projects as well as a projected increase in CalPERS within the next 5 years. In regards to the enterprise fund, we are projecting an ending working capital as of June 30, 2012, $4.3 million for the water fund and $341,000 for the wastewater fund. The development of the enterprise fund budget also came with challenges, and the challenges were within the wastewater fund due to the fact that it has a very low working capital. As mentioned before, working capital is $341,000. It's low working capital. It is not sufficient to cover the 10% that is required by our own city policy. It is, I believe, only 8%. As a result of that, there is no designation for accrued leave liability and no designation for vehicle and major equipment replacement. The other issue with the low coverage, working capital is that it has a low coverage ratio. As you know, we have per bond covenants a requirement to maintain a coverage ratio of 115%. That's total revenues against the annual debt service. The wastewater has a ratio of 116%, which is sufficient to meet the coverage ratio that we're required to maintain. However, it is not sufficient to cover any fluctuations within revenues or expenses. That is a concern. To improve the ratio, we either have to increase revenues or reduce expenditures. And for that endeavor, to provide us with our options, the city's options, we are we have contracted with a consultant to conduct a rate study to provide us future options. The last rate study is dated 2005. This is the water working capital at $4.3 million. We have an allocation, a full 10%. We have an allocation of $200,000 for accrued leave liability, which is equal to the amount of the liability. We have a designation of $3 million for vehicle and major equipment replacement. Somewhat adequate. Accumulated depreciation is 3.7, so we're close enough. And we also have an undesignated unreserved of $678,000. With regards to the wastewater, as mentioned before, the working capital is only $341,000, which is only 8% for economic unknowns and no designation for accrued leave liability. Required to be $221,000 and no designation for vehicle and major equipment replacement. Yes. We're working on that. In regards to the capital budget, it totals $51.1 million, with the majority of it going towards public works, $48 million. Within public works, we have two major projects, the $23.9 million for water and wastewater system improvements. For wastewater system improvements within here, it's $19 million to be financed out of the 2006 bond proceeds. Then we have for street improvements, $20.9 million, and then an amount allocated for sidewalks, bike and pedestrian improvements, street equipment, bus terminal at 7th and State, and miscellaneous bus shelter improvement at $76,000. For Parks and Recreation, we have allocated and learning, $1.7 million. The majority of it allocated towards the sports pavilion at Adams Park, $1.2 million. However, we have an additional $3 million coming in from the redevelopment agency. We have allocated the amount for the jogging path and the sunflower restroom and snack bar, and $66,000 for the library collection software equipment. For public safety, we have allocated $1 million, $797,000 for vehicles, equipment, furniture, computers, parking lot, etc. Now, these funds are from special revenue funds. Again, as mentioned before, those are they come from other agencies, and they're restricted for specific purposes.
So, you know, it's the parking lot for the
at the new building. Yes, or at the new site. $233,000 for fire station number 3 out of impact fees for furniture and equipment. Then finally, $500,000 for administration, council chambers ADA compliance, $373,000, $88,000 for administration and other departments for various equipment. In the development of this budget, we also took into consideration the various strategic goals, program goals for the city. Those goals are as follows: transportation and mobility, safe neighborhoods, recreation and lifelong learning, economic development, and city beautification. In the development of this budget, as mentioned before, we took all of these goals into consideration, and we are proud to say that we have met all of those goals. For example, for transportation and mobility, we have met this goal, and the allocation within this budget is $25.6 million. The majority of it allocated to street improvements, construction, and sidewalks at $20.9 million, and then $1.5 million for street maintenance, cleaning, and lighting, $2.4 million for the bus terminal and improvements, and so on, for a total of $25.6 million. For safe neighborhoods, we have allocated $15.7 million. That's 14.7 is within the general fund for operations of police and fire. That's 62% of the general fund budget. And then allocations for both the fire station, number 3, and for police vehicles, equipment, and computers. For city beautification, we have met goal number 4. We have allocated $86,000 for landscape and lighting districts. And finally, for goal number 3, recreation and lifelong learning, we have allocated $7.3 million, $2 million for operations for parks and recreation, $541,000 for the library, and then capital and the total amount of $4.8 million, including the sports pavilion, $3 million from the RDA, Redevelopment Agency. In summary, we're providing you with a balanced budget with no layoffs, no furloughs, that meets the city's strategic goals. And done. Any questions?
Thank you. We don't have a copy of that on paper that I can.
On paper?
Yeah.
Oh, the presentation.
The presentation.
I have my version.
Can I borrow it? Because I'll need that tomorrow. Questions from the council?
And we'll have this sent to all the council.
Do you? Oh,
But he
not
needs it
now?
for tomorrow morning.
Oh, I can email it. Yes.
Well, he needs it
Slides.
for tomorrow morning at 6, so if we can
Oh,
have this
yes.
one.
Yes, I can email
Well,
it.
he does the radio show. I know.
Yeah, I call her. I
7.
typically call her around 6:30 in the morning.
Oh, my goodness, okay.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Edney.
I just want to thank the staff. We were talking earlier about 2003 and Mr. Duran's first month in the council, and things have improved significantly since then. But it's a shame to me that more people don't stay and see this, because when people question why you're making decisions on employees contributing to their retirement and whatnot, if you take a few minutes to review not only what's in this budget, but your slide presentation, you see how perilous this situation is. One of the things that you came to us at the previous budget workshop about was the ability to balance the budget based on there had been an increase in sales tax revenue.
Yes.
Now, we all agree, and we discussed at that time, that the sales tax revenue shot up significantly.
Yes.
Now, if we look at, and all we can do is guesstimate, that's what you really do, right? A lot of what we do is just hoping and praying that the numbers come in where we think. And you're really good at it, and your staff is really good at it. But if any time in the last 4 or 5 years I'm more concerned, it's right now. Because while the sales tax numbers increased in the fourth quarter, and we saw a slight bump in the first quarter, look at the economic data that's coming out. We just saw that last week. The first quarter GDP revised significantly down. The forecast for second, third, fourth quarter, significantly down. Look at the jobs report. We have to produce 250,000 new jobs a month to maintain. And last month's report was 54,000. Now, you can't take a single month, but the trends are not good. And that's the federal issue. That's the economy. We still have a state that is less than 30 days from having to pass a balanced budget, in which they're not even close. And listing what you've listed in here in regard to the potential cuts, well, any of us who are sitting in this room really must believe that many of those cuts are going to come forth in some fashion. Whether RDA somehow gets saved, it doesn't mean that they're not going to go steal it from somewhere else. They've got to have the money. Correct?
Yes.
I'm very concerned. We have nothing left over. There's no room. Right? I haven't seen, there's not 1 ounce, there's not $1 other than the reserve for what we started last year. This is going to be a difficult time for us, and I think it's to the hard work of the city staff that we've been able to maintain, it's a foolishness to believe that a year from now this economy, or 2 years from now, this economy is all of a sudden going to turn around and we're going to gain $3 or $4 million in revenues. Anybody disagree with that? Now, let's just assume that we're all fools.
That we're all
And
fools?
that's, we're all fools.
Absolutely.
Let's just assume that.
That's good.
And 2 years from now, we get back $4 million in revenue. From whatever source, I don't know. They plant gold trees out there or something. If you look at the forecast that we've looked at as city staff, that $4 million is going to be what our costs are going to increase over the next 2 or 3 years. Right?
6.2 million.
Okay, so where wouldn't be one head, even if everything got better, even if we went back to the rolling heydays of 2006, 2007, we would be right flat back where we are today. That's cause for concern. And we all know that that's not going to happen. Our revenues are not going to grow 20% in the next 2 years. So I appreciate the staff. I think you've done a yeoman's job on putting together a budget. We'll take a little bit of credit for sticking with it, but I'm telling you, it is a great tribute to this city that everybody is still employed.
And if I would like, before the rest of the council speak, is I want to, again, indicate my deep appreciation for Ms. Salcido and her staff, and also all the department heads. While you see this at the end, this starts really, well, typically in November, but we've been working on this budget since January of 2010. We started the first $2 million cut, and it has just been a work in progress ever since. So what reason you see 105 million, those are all special revenues. If, you know, again, you look back, all of our slides are very good, but all the staff pulling together and constantly trying to research alternatives, which some of them you saw tonight, we didn't act on them as of yet, but we're looking at how do we cut those costs and how do we cut our numbers. The big number in there, you saw 79% of the budget, of the operating budget, is personnel and benefits. And so that's why we have to keep going back to the big number. To ignore that, then we're not really dealing with things. We're just going to, trim around the edges. Personnel is the big number, no matter how we do this. And the same people are the ones who help do all this work. So that's my dilemma. That is the conundrum that I have.
The final comment I want to make is that if you go back to the summer of 2003, and 10% of the then city staff was laid off, not only was it devastating to those people that got laid off, but as we saw, when you lose that amount of personnel, how many years does it take you to rebuild your city infrastructure as far as your employees? So it's not just the cost of laying those employees off. It took us as a team, as a city, as a staff, it took us 3 or 4 years to build back that staff with the experience and the capabilities and whatnot to provide those services. And I think that's why I personally have been so adamant about not having layoffs as long as we can, because it's not just the cut in services by losing the staff, it's the cuts in the services that you can't gain just by immediately going back and hiring staff when the economy turns. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Freddie. Ms. Walker?
Is there anything in the budget that accounts for reimbursement from FEMA or county with regards to reimbursement for earthquake damage? I know we've received a very small portion. The timing is uncertain, but I'm wondering, does the budget include or contemplate?
We have a division, a special revenue fund set up for the reimbursement from FEMA, yes.
Okay.
How do you anticipate, or do you anticipate the sales tax and the property tax coming back anytime soon? And the reason why I'm asking is because I noticed that out by the malls, they're building a new facility, Kohl's. So that's going to be an increase, but I noticed that inside the mall, we seem to be losing people. And so how do you figure that? I mean, because you're the top dog and getting
Actually,
stuff like this.
we have a consultant, so we work very closely with that consultant, and what we do in projecting our revenues for next year, we sit down and we analyze the various stores, the closings of stores, new, for example, Kohl's, so we take that into consideration. For example, for a new Kohl's, we estimate based on what their average is in other cities and what the revenues are, we estimate what potentially is going to be the revenue for the city of El Centro of those new stores opening up. We also take into consideration any of the ones that have closed, so we make reductions to our projections for next year. We look very closely at the situation within the city of El Centro to determine what our revenues are going to be for next year.
I didn't know you did all that. That's
Yes,
nice
and
to
also,
know.
in our property tax analysis, keep in mind that Prop 13 limits the amount of growth on those properties. So while they slid 18% 1 year, they can only come back at 2% outside of sales, of supplements. So the property tax will crawl back very slowly, which is a big element of our revenues. When I was at the Las Vegas conference for ICSC and with Chamber was with us, the comments were made it was about the same as last year, a little bit smaller, but reminding that 85% of all leases for the large retailers are written there. That's what the purpose of it is. It was, as they said, well, it doesn't look like it's getting worse, is what the comments I kept getting. I met with some of the CBL folks. They said, well, it's looking better. And what's really was helping was the discussions about this area. We seem to be we're a little more stable than other areas. And we think we know it's very much to do with Mexicali. So it has to do with the dollar. If the peso stays where it's at, we're going to get a little bit of shoring up. Everywhere else, though, it's pretty abysmal.
Yes, I just wanted to echo the comments that were made already and thank the staff for this report. I suppose I'm just the eternal optimist. I just believe things will get better. While I can see and understand that the light at the end of the tunnel doesn't look like much, I do not believe it is train. I know that when I did come on, one of the things that was stated by then Mayor Castillo was a train wreck as it related to the budget. He called it a train wreck. So Mr. Edney and I can concur on the fact that there was a lot of different changes that took place. One of the things that I personally have trouble with is when we tend to use what I call the Wall Street model to establish public policy. I just think Wall Street is business. Cities are not in the business of making profits. We're in the business of providing service. So we do need a certain level of employees in order for those services to be delivered. And that's why it's so valuable to retain the ones we do have and to try to make sure we put everything in place for that retention. And so that, in that regard, I applaud the staff for that. When we look at the number of jobs growth that we've had nationwide and we say there was only 55,000, at least it was growth. It wasn't a reduction in jobs. We've seen a reduction in jobs, we've seen people losing jobs, and we've seen those who are unemployed, and consequently the unemployment monies are running out. But when we look at the short term, which means this budget and what we have in place for this fiscal year, 11-12, I see a lot of hope. I really do. I mean, we're talking about things that will definitely enhance the quality of life for the citizens in this community. So I see hope here. Hope that whether or not we're able to maintain it, But with the interest that this council has shown for the last number of years, with the determination that's being put forth by our staff, meaning management as well as miscellaneous employees, I think we will survive. Will we survive at the level that we have in the past? Perhaps not. It's going to take us a while to grow ourselves out of this. When it comes to looking at the codes and all the projections with you and your consultant looking at, we both know that when you have a new business move in, sometimes it's not really the kind of growth we anticipate. It's just a shifting of dollars where people spend their money. So we know that in that regard, we have to be a little cautious in that. When it talks about the housing market, Mr. Edney earlier in his comments tonight, maybe about 4 hours ago, said something to the effect that being a realtor right now is not necessarily the best thing to be in because there's just not much out there. But at least in my mind, this budget is reflective of hope. So I want to say that as we're approaching the midnight hour, and I hope it's not the bewitching hour. But as we approach the midnight hour, I see a ray of hope because we have really been very tenacious. We've been steadfast, and we have really worked with, we the council have worked with you, the staff, in order to get this accomplished. So I applaud all of you for your efforts.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. We do have a request by our police chief to address the council regarding the budget. Mr. McGinley?
I know this can't be popular at this time, but I'm here seeking authorization to make 2 changes within my budget that does not impact the balanced budget that you just saw. And I wanted to briefly talk about what those are. How do you make it go from the next one? Obviously, we want to provide the best service that we can and keep our neighborhoods safe. I'm not going to stand here and read what you can see. What I'm looking for are 2 different things. I'm looking for a reclassification of 1 police commander position to an assistant police chief position. Since July of '09, I've had the authorization from the city manager to create an executive commander position. We've had that position in place. It's proven to be extremely successful. The duties and functions from day to day are more appropriately classified as an assistant chief position. This is an overview of what is already being done at that position at the executive commander position that I want to change to assistant chief of police. One of the things that occurred when we started talking about this, we had a discussion of this with the Human Resources Department, and they determined that if we wanted to make this change, it would be a reclassification as opposed to a new position. The Human Resources Department recommended that it would have to be a new position with a higher pay scale. I'm requesting that it be a reclassification, and that because the incumbent in that position now is a G22 pay rate, and the other commanders are G21 pay rate. So there's already a pay separation that already exists within that rank structure. I'm also requesting that since it isn't going to be a new position, that if you approve this, the assistant chief position would continue to be a civil service position, because there will be no change in salary or benefits for that position. This is the highest priority of the next one I'm going to talk about. This is currently the way our budget is structured, with chief, 3 commanders, and a police administrative manager. This is how we've been operating since July of 2009, which in essence is what I'm asking for, that change, to change that title from executive commander to assistant chief of police. To eliminate 1 police officer position, one of the budgeted positions, and change that to a community service officer position. The role of the community service officer has expanded since I've been here in the last 2 years. They are the ones that are going out as a first responder. We're getting much better response times to citizens on reporting cold crimes. That's just a quick overview of what a community service officer during that calendar year, what they did, the two of them. So you can see that they answered a lot of calls, they took a lot of reports, basically over almost 600, well, 608 reports, 613 reports. And then crime prevention. So by adding one more position in the CSO, this is what it looks like for dollars. The reclassification to the commander to assistant chief costs nothing. The elimination of one police officer position and adding a CSO will actually add 38 grand to the balanced budget.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Questions for?
The police officer position, that's a budgeted but unfilled position?
Correct. We currently have 5 openings, and so I want to eliminate one position and get that CSO position locked in so we can.
Where are we at, Chief, with regard to the type of hours that your department, the patrol folks are working? They're not working.
The shifts?
Yeah, they're not working 12,
Yes.
16-hour shifts, are they?
They're working 12s. 7 to 7 and 7 to 7.
I thought we were going to transition away from.
We can't because we don't have, in order to transition away from that, we'd have to have 55 sworn positions to go to the 410 plan. That's just not a realistic thing for us to achieve with what's going on with the economy right now. We've actually gone backwards since I've been here.
What about overtime?
Well, we're within our overtime budget, the allotted amount. Fortunately, a lot of our overtime can be consumed with the asset forfeiture. But with the allotted amount that we have in our current budget, we're on track. And that's for court and for the almost predictable types of things. But a lot of our overtime is actually special details that's associated with either Stone Garden or one of the grants that we've obtained through Office of Traffic Safety.
And why is this coming to the city council since it seems like a restructuring?
Well, I can answer that. Is I reviewed this prior to the presentation of the preliminary budget, and I'm not recommending any, first of all, I'm not recommending any reclassifications. I think there were 3, 4 that were submitted. Given the nature of the budget, one is not to approve any type of reclassifications. Secondly, in the last 3 years the chief's been with us, we reduced the number of police officers already by 6. And I was not prepared to recommend reducing it any more for the simple reason is we would just continue to go backwards, as the chief pointed out. I recognize the benefit of CSOs, but not at the loss of another, now we'll be down 7. In our discussions in labor negotiations, this issue's been brought up with the number of police officers that we've reduced already, and they're concerned about the issue of safety and then the work hours. We'll never achieve those 10 hours, which, by the way, was a goal if we continue to reallocate. I recognize the benefit of CSOs, dispatchers. We're missing 2 dispatchers. Before we got to dispatcher, we're at bare minimums. Remember that process we went through? We went to 12, we're back to 10. It's a challenge, but given the circumstances we're in, we're looking at the furloughs, layoffs, et cetera, is not my recommendation. My recommendation, and Chief has been very good at trying to achieve this, is fill those positions. We swore in somebody earlier this week, Thursday, and new officer came in. But we lose officers.
We're still currently recruiting for the positions. We're not going to try to fill all of them.
As for the reclassification specific to this one, first of all, you have an ordinance in place that says that if you are going to have an assistant director position, it is an at-will position with a contract. It is not part of the civil service. That would be a separate action. But given in the totality of all the requests, the presentation that Ms. Alcida gave you is my recommended budget.
Any questions for me?
Well,
what I'm trying to do is legitimize what I'm doing.
Okay, but I guess my concern is a little bit along Ms. Walker's concern. First of all, I'm not used to being presented something as a first blush in a PowerPoint presentation as opposed to having backup material. What I don't see, first of all, if I remember, it wasn't just too many years ago that we went to the commander positions. Correct?
That occurred prior to my arrival,
Okay,
and
but
then
we went to the
I
commander
identified that as a problem when I got
to whom?
to the organization of the police department.
Okay, and I'm not questioning that, except we haven't seen that. And in fact, you show me an executive commander the way you've been operating. I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't aware. I mean, I remember us approving the whole reorganization, the 4 commanders and a police chief. So before I would make any determination, I'd want some background. Why is it that we're switching back to a different way when we just started something 3 years ago? You may say we need it. I'd like to see some background on it. 2, I don't understand why if it's an assistant director's position, have we talked to Human Resources about whether that should be a civil service or a non-civil
Well,
service?
you already have an ordinance that says that it will not be a civil service position.
Okay, but these are the kind of things I'm saying. We don't have any background material to have time to review this. So I don't know whether that can be provided and we come back and look at this in 2 weeks, or...
Mr. Andy, the reason that I'm bringing this forward is because in the preliminary budget proposal, that information was in there, this request, to change those positions, but there wasn't any discussion on it, so I needed to seize the opportunity to not let it die on the vine, if possible.
I don't remember seeing any background.
It was part of the
very
it was in the PowerPoint presentation. It was like slide
For the
general fund. It was
broke
when
it
we
down by
showed
department.
other positions and other upgrades and other capital that was not approved.
The police officer, this is why I'm suggesting, I'm not comfortable with this because there's a lot of questions, and if we would have been provided backup material, like, for instance, how many police officers were we filled in 2009, 10, 11, and now what's proposed? That's number one. I should see that. Second of all, you suggested that on one of your slides that there's a $38,000 savings.
There would be if we convert the position.
Well, wait a minute. There would be a $38,000 budgeted savings.
Correct.
But not necessarily an actual savings in dollars, because if you have 5 openings, and those are budgeted positions, but they're not being spent dollars on, and you add a community services officer.
But you eliminate one of those police officer positions.
Okay, sir, from a budgeted standpoint, you would save $38,000.
Correct.
From an actual spending standpoint, you would actually probably increase your cost. Those positions are budgeted, but you're not spending that money because they're open.
Correct, but my budget reflects those positions.
Well, okay, but that's why I said budgeted was, but actual spending the dollar. You have a budgeted position, but if you have 4 openings, we're not spending any dollars. So an actual cost, it would increase the cost of running your department.
Okay, but as soon as I fill one of those police officer positions, then it offsets it if I had filled it with a CSO, then it would take it even further.
Well, I would all obviously, I mean, that's assuming that all the positions were filled.
Right.
So, I before I would consider this, I want some more information. I want to know what we're going to do. I think, quite honestly, I think the mayor said it the best. This is unusual for us to be, in my time on this council, to not have this come worked out between the department head and the city manager with a backup material with recommendations. And so I don't know whether it should be a civil service position or it shouldn't be a civil service position. Usually we would have backup material that would say the request is that it not be made a civil service position, or that it should based on this ordinance or based on this. We don't have any of that.
And you did present this, or you have presented it to the city manager during the budget discussions that you have with department heads.
Yes, we've actually talked about it several times over the last 18 months, and then
2 years.
I was given direction from Mr. Duran to bring it and discuss it.
Well, Chief, wanted to talk to you about it, and I said, you have the opportunity to do that, and I want to. That's why I give you. It's the totality of the budget that I deal with, and as you're aware, other ones. Again, coming back to is loss of. There were separate issues, and originally this was a combined issue to where there would be an increase to the executive commander, assistant chief would get an increase. So this was a change from the original presentation. Our HR folks said this is a change. This is a new position. You can give up position, and we can have that go forward, but there is an increase in the cost because you come back to is, well, the individual now has assistant chief duties. Secondly, you already passed it as an ordinance. It will be, unless you amend your ordinance, this will be an at-will position, which apparently That's not acceptable, because I brought this up before.
Well, that's
The
not what
separate
he's-
matter
that's
of
not
the
what
police
he's gonna-
officer runs separate from this. My concern is, if, for you to consider eliminating a police officer for anything else, then quite frankly, you get the $100,000, I'm using $100,000 back. Now, where in the general fund do you want to place that? It is not owned by a department, no more than if you had a staff assistant in engineering that we're going to eliminate. Those reallocation of general fund dollars deserves that discussion. It's not just a matter of, well, we're going to keep it in the department. You may have determined that, no, we're going to offset some of the RDA costs. I'm using that as an extreme example. That's a separate discussion. And right now, because we're 6 down from since the chief got here, I'm hesitant to go any farther. Because the 6 was a real wrenching moment, because it had to do with a grant, and we're having to fill 3 positions, and Ms. Salcido and I, we worked quite hard on that 3 years ago, and it was wrenching to lose those 6 positions. And that's where our struggle with police officers are.
I'm gonna ask, because it's getting to midnight.
Yes.
I'm going to maybe combine the comments that I made and also the comments that Mr. Edney made as it relates to additional information.
And the great value that both bring to the table, but that gets us further away from our staffing levels necessary to do something with that 12 to 12 shift.
Well, to change away from that 12-12 shift, we would have to hire a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I don't see that happening in the next 2 years.
More than the 5 that we have vacant.
Correct.
Oh, yeah, we need the 6 back that we lost, at least.
We would have to have over 55 sworn, and right now I believe we have 47.
Right.
Well, I want to go back to the mayor's comment. What does this directly have to do with approving the budget? Are you suggesting that if the assistant chief's position or the commander's position have nothing directly to do with the budget? The way it's being presented, there's no cost.
There's no.
So
When you
that's
adopt
not a
the-
budget is. We
when you-
change positions in the future or at any time. So I'm not clear on that. At the very least, according to the chief, this would be a savings if we did take care of the officer, eliminate one officer per CSO. That doesn't affect the budget in a negative way. So I guess I'm concerned why this is directly tied to the budget and why we can't approve the budget and bring back a fuller background on all these points that I brought up, which is the CSO, the number of officers, whether it should be a civil service or non-civil service, and then give us some time to review it, and we can go forward. I don't think it's directly related to the budget.
The budget can be approved, and if there's anything that does affect the budget, could always be amended.
Exactly.
But I mean,
That's why I'm
there's no issue there.
Is that a motion to approve the budget as presented and to have this item brought back?
Because the budget sets also the number of personnel and the titles. So
So it
it
could be
can be amended. Because, by the way, we may be doing that with the state legislature doing. So the
Right.
point is,
So, okay,
is you
my
can, but I
motion
need
is to
direction
approve
that
the
you want to see
budget
this.
and bring this item back with further details and background information.
That's what I need.
Okay, that's motion moved by Edney, second by Solomon. Please, ballots.
With the understanding that it's coming back. I have a question to the motion, and that is, would it be helpful if the ad hoc committee that worked before would be reconstituted, or do you feel that this could be just,
Oh, I think we'd work it through and get it back to you.
all right, thank you.
Yeah. So what I need is the direction, because it's a different direction.
It's a direction.
Motion passes.
All
It's a
right.
directive,
What do we have? Informational items, public comments. Any member of the public wishes to make comments? Seeing none. Council member reports, Mr. Edney? No? Ms. Walker?
Pass,
None of us
pass,
have any
pass.
comments.
No,
We
we're
all wanna go
passing.
home. All right. We'll adjourn the council meeting. We'll